Welcome to the show Brain Rot, What Our Screens Are Doing to Our Minds, a special series from the New Books Network. Here are your hosts, Dr. Karen Messina and Dr. Harry Gill.
Hello, I'm Dr. Karen Messina, host of the New Book Network's podcast, Brain Rot, What Our Screens Are Doing to Our Minds. I have the good fortune of being joined by the show's co-host, Dr. Harry Gill. He's a very well-known psychiatrist, and he also happens to have a PhD in neuroscience, which is excellent for the book that we have just written, Disconnected Together, a guide to reclaiming connection in a digital world. So today we're going to talk a bit about that, but also we're going to talk about the concept of the lonely crowd. In 1951, I think he's written others, but a person called David Riesman wrote a book about the lonely crowd. And what he saw emerging at that time was a different phenomenon. People were being influenced by peers. They were being other-directed, I believe is the term he used, versus being interdirected, which had happened previously when people were influenced by parents, by grandparents, by other family members, and perhaps friends of the family, but not by peers. So there's a shift there. And I'm wondering, Dr. Gill, if when you write about the lonely crowd, you're talking about something similar.
Indeed, I think the enormous shift in the communication patterns and the new communities that are formed is really remapping the community as we know it. I just recently wrote a Substack on this particular topic, inspired by a walk down Third Avenue in New York City, where I live, seeing how many people are looking at their screens and not really looking at each other, or looking at the stores, or looking at the windows with headphones, not even hearing the sounds of the city, let alone talking to each other. So the sense of isolation for that entire duration of the walk was very striking. And similarly, in the theater setting, prior to the appearance of the smartphone, people would sit next to each other and maybe share an experience of the weather, of whether they saw the play, whether they saw a similar play, or at the opera, do we share our likings of Verdi or Puccini, or there would have been a communication, exchange of ideas and experience, and creation of common experience and relaxation in the common knowledge. Today, it's completely common for people, even in a very serious setting, to be staring at their screen, and as the lights come down, they're struggling to turn the phones off because they needed to squeeze that extra minute of screen time, and immediately leaping from whatever Instagram, Facebook text they were doing into an experience of maybe seeing a play or a movie or an opera. It really limits our ability to communicate with each other. And as you say, on a more toxic level, our kids are growing up really not interconnected with their parents or even their peer group in a serious way, because they are much more connected increasingly to groups that they play their favorite games with. So it's a community experience of sharing a game. So in the chat, they have friends. On Discord, they have friends. And shared ideas in this kind of a community, quote unquote, is, I think, largely responsible for the hot topic of today, the isolated male, and the resulting aggression or the increased violence in the society that we see. Because an unregulated or undistilled focus on one particular community experience can really focus somebody on that particular worldview or a sense of self, without the distillation or dilution of to say the opposite, dilution of that experience by talking to the family or teachers or school friends or other people.
I guess we could say, if we just wanted to use shorthand, that the smartphone is the digital device that really accentuates other directedness. Now, people don't think so much about who am I as a person, which we know teenagers, it's a time to think about that. But it's, what do other people think of me? So it's hard to develop a self when all you're ever focused on is what everybody else thinks of you.
I think the basic human position of um, relative anxiety, insecurity, and fear of the other, which is kind of like Melanie Klein paranoid schizoid position that most people exist in, puts us at a disadvantage. Most of us are conflicted with aggression. We don't necessarily want to engage in conflict. So from that perspective, dealing with other people increases anxiety to a certain level. In extreme cases, it can become social anxiety and phobia and a treatable condition. But at the minimum, when we meet a stranger, there is some degree of anxiety in assessing what is going to transpire. And now we use the term digital pacifier, and it literally is like a digital pacifier. It gives us something to do, something to direct our attention to, so nobody has to look at each other. We talked about this just moments ago in schools in New York City, because they removed screens from the curriculum, and kids are not allowed to bring anything that's digitally connected to the school, including a smartwatch. They introduced classes of teaching kids how to shake their hands, and they're teaching them eye contact. Yes, some of the basic brain functions really do deteriorate. There's a basic rhythm, a cadence, music to the encounter between two people. And if you're staring at a phone and rapidly shifting from the phone into a conversation, that you don't develop it or you lose it as a function.
I actually heard on the early news this morning that 21 states have banned cell phones. And there have been some preliminary studies, there haven't been a lot, but some preliminary studies suggest that kids are doing a lot better on tests than they have in the past. So is there a correlation? It seems like there probably is. Of course, more studies need to be done, but it seems like it's a good start.
And I think people are much more sophisticated and now aware. And I was delighted to hear about the bans of cell phones and screens in school settings. I think just from basic neuroscience principle of learning and brain plasticity, training the brain to focus on an extended length stimulus, i.e. a lecture, a book, a task, for extended period of time versus seconds long TikTok video, seconds long Instagram post, like something that really fractures the attention and doesn't have continuity to it, is really training the brain not to be able to attend for anything that takes some time. So we have ADHD galore, and kids come to me for prescriptions of Adderall and Ritalin, which I think nobody likes to prescribe, but removing the phones is tantamount to, I would say, cognitive rehab, where you're removing something that is training one part of the brain, which is to be hypervigilant, and now you're training the brain to be more able to focus, to maintain attention, which is called tenacity of attention.
That's why we wrote this book, from a neuroscience and a psychoanalytic perspective, disconnected together. That's what happens. So we want to help people reclaim connection in a digital world. I find it to be sad and disconcerting when you see pictures of family members of all ages, we'll say 7-year-olds on up, and then maybe or maybe not, there's a baby and some sort of carrier nearby, and everybody is looking at their phones. Or if you go to a restaurant and you see a couple and, they enter the restaurant, they sit down, they're greeted by someone, the maitre d' or the waiter, and the first thing they do, take out their phones. I was watching that in a restaurant around this area being the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. And I really thought it was really sad. They weren't talking to each other. They were just looking at their phones. So anyway, that is why we read the book. And it will be out the 15th, which is Saturday on Amazon.
We're very excited about the book, and it was written in let's say plain English, so anybody can read it. We really made an effort to make it accessible to anybody, and it was inspired by our work with parents and repeating some of these themes over and over again. So there's a distillation of our therapeutic experience in the book.
And also, it's based on Erik Erikson's widely used and very respected 8 stages of development. So it starts in infancy and it goes through middle childhood, adolescence, adulthood, older adulthood, and then older adulthood. But we also have parents to think about. Parents can not socialize with people, whether it be their neighbors or people in some sort of nursing home facility. If they just watch their TV all day, it's not going to be as good for their brains versus if they go to the community room and play games with other people. My mother-in-law lived to be 104, and she was very social. She was always at bingo winning quarters, and really, I think she was sort of queen of the May. So anyway, this book applies to people in all ages, infancy on up. So we'll talk more about it in the next podcast. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll be back.